Ancient civilizations preserved power, law, and memory through songs, through seals, and through sacred processions. In Egypt, for instance, and Mesopotamia, kings had their decrees carved into stone and recited by temple singers. In Assyria, royal victories were immortalized through psalms sung by the court musicians, not merely for the art, but to remind the people who ruled and why. Babylonian priests inscribed the names of favored rulers into clay tablets sealed and buried in temple foundations, believing those names would echo in eternity. In Israel, however, something different happened. The Hebrew kings did not just commission hymns about their victories, they sang of Yahweh's rule. David, the warrior poet, did not glorify his own sword, but wrote, "The Lord reigns, let the nations tremble." The Psalms became not royal propaganda, but sacred prophecy, a national soundtrack that looked forward to a day when God Himself would be enthroned on Mount Zion, surrounded not by generals, but by a sanctified people. This vision finds its final echo in the 14th chapter of Revelation. What Egypt etched in stone, what Babylon sealed in clay, what Assyrians sang for empire, God fulfills in the Lamb and His people, whose hearts and foreheads bear His name. Their story is foretold in Psalms, songs of Zion loaded with divine justice, identity, and future glory. Stay tuned, don't go anywhere. I want to welcome you to Steady Insights, and in this episode we look at In the Psalms, Part 1. We delve deeper into the significance of songs, especially in the context of prophecy. Remember, we are still looking at images, symbols, allusions, interpretation of prophecy. Then I looked, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion, with him 144,000, having his father's name written on their foreheads. And the next question that actually comes into mind is, who are these people? Very clearly, beyond its function as a hymnal to be used in public and private worship, the book of Psalms is an eminently prophetic book written by prophets, and there are no two ways about that. In fact, that would be the bedrock of our discourse in this episode. Psalms is not limited to prophesying about Christ's ministry, but it is actually a rich repository of themes which are related to the history and the timeline of redemption. In this discourse, we'll be looking at Psalm 122, the heavenly sanctuary. We'll zoom into Psalm 15 and 24 while we discuss the holy mountain. Then quickly dive into Psalm 119, which will reveal a lot of facts for us by looking at the name of God. Going into Psalm 5 in a reverse fashion, discuss the redeemed. Then finally dissect the importance of Psalm 51 by looking at the proclamation of the gospel. Let's zoom into this. The first part, which is Psalm 122, a very important psalm at that, because it brings to bear the heavenly sanctuary or the celestial sanctuary. In a way, it presents to us one of the most important ways by which the Psalms alludes in the context of prophecy to the sanctuary. In ancient Israel, the sanctuary was more than a building. It was a visual prophecy. In fact, every article from the lampstand to the ark pointed to realities in the heavenly sanctuary. And as you can clearly see, we have discussed this in depth throughout the previous episodes that we have had the privilege to look at prophecy. Psalm 122 prophetically points to the gathering of the redeemed into the New Jerusalem to worship at the real heavenly sanctuary. It is quite important for me to note that Revelation itself, especially in the context of prophecy, offers several visions of this heavenly sanctuary, from which the courtyard, which represents the earth, is excluded. Let me delve deeper. The sanctuary in Revelation unveils, number 1, the lampstand, which is seen in Revelation chapter 4 verse 5. Then, when you move along the themes, it reveals the golden altar, especially found in Revelations 8 verse 3, then a little further in Revelations 14, 18, and finally even in Revelation 16 verse 7. Then the most important article as far as the presence of God is invoked, the ark, found in Revelations 11, then verse 19. It will surprise you to know that these are themes which actually radiate from the book of Psalms in the chapter 122. We can also appreciate all these themes closely linked to the messages of Revelation. The lampstand, praise; the golden altar being judgment; then the security of the people represented in verse 7 as the ark. How do we say this? The lampstand actually depicts the light in the sanctuary, where we offer praise, which denotes the clearing of the way of the people of God, then also how they enjoy the closeness and the prevailing light of God. Clearly, the golden altar, which shows where the burnt offerings are made, give us atonement through judgment as depicted in the book of Psalms. Then finally, our peace and security are protected by beholding the ark, the presence of God. More fulfilling is that we see that all of this mirror the experience of those who dwell in the presence of the Lamb on Mount Zion. Psalm 15 and 24, as we look at the holy mountain. What does the holy mountain present? And we see this captured beautifully in the 15th chapter of the book of Psalms. Mount Zion, once the geographical site of the temple, became a symbol of God's throne. And this is something I wouldn't want you to miss. It's very important to know that in prophetic writings, actually, Mount Zion is used to define the place where the redeemed will gather. And you find these themes in Isaiah 37, Psalm 74, and finally, in the apocalyptic book, Revelation 14 verse 1. The question is this: who will be able to stand on Mount Zion with Jesus? A very important question, especially for every believer who craves to be part of the heavenly redeemed. Who will be able to stand on Mount Zion with Jesus? And wonderfully, the answer actually resonates from the book of Psalms. How important are the Psalms? Psalm 15 and 24 define the characteristics of those who are worthy to be there. And these characteristics are supposed to be carefully guarded because they are the only qualifying merits by which you can be part of those who will stand on Mount Zion. Number 1, he who walks uprightly and does righteousness and does not lie. Where do we see this? Depicted in Psalm 15 verse 2. Remember, Psalms giving us very important details even qualifying merits by which you can be part of those who are being described in the prophecy of Revelations 14. Number 2, he who does not slander does no harm to his neighbor, nor does he allow evil to be spoken of. The 3rd verse of Psalm 15. Number 3, he who honors those who fear God and does not change even if it is detrimental. 4th verse. The number 4, he who does not love money nor can be bribed. Someone will just say, is this going to be ever possible? Well, these are the characteristics being described in the book of Psalm. Number 5, he who has clean hands and a pure heart, who is neither proud nor a liar. Clearly seen in Psalm 24 verse 4. So you can see perfectly that none of us, if we are to evaluate ourselves, meet all of these requirements. So it is important that we are granted pardon through grace in order to be able to arrive at the holy mountain. But it comes through a particular channel, and that channel is Christ. But before then, there should be a particular important rite that is performed to get candidature into the holy mount of God. And that is where we see the name of God. Very important. Let me ask you, what does your name connote? How do people revere your name? And which feelings are brought to those who call your name? In the olden days, there were people who were known to be fearsome by the mere mention of their names. We see several names in antiquity. Names like Cyrus, names like the pharaohs, names like even the kings of Israel like David, Saul, and more recently, names like Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and even in the context of Ghana, John Mahama. Names quite evoke very important themes no matter where they are coming from, especially when they have a bearing on a particular timeline in history. Let me take you down the road of history in the context of the northern tribes in Ghana. In the olden times, especially before the current Ghana came to be what it is, most of the tribes in the northern region were fighting amongst themselves. Of course, most of them actually traveled into Ghana from far and distant lands. The people of Dagomba pride themselves with one prominent figure in the context of history, and that name is Tohazie, but for a popular phonetic is usually known as Tohazi. Tohazie or Tohazi was known as the Red Hunter. In fact, the name Tohazie means the Red Hunter, and is one of the most important figures when it comes to conquests. Tohazie led the Dagombes, and by his conquests brought the descendancy of the kingship or the instruments in Dagomba. His descendants started with Na Bewa, and by this we have the people of Dagomba fully settled in the northern part of Ghana. When you mention the name of Tohazie, you invoke the spirits of the Dagombes. Clearly, in the Bible, we see themes of the importance of the name that people have. And much more important is the name of God. The name of God is not just a title, it is his character. And by this we see that it is not with just anything that the redeemed, who are known as the 144,000 redeemed, are identified in the Revelations. Mount Zion is closely linked to the name of God. The name, especially in biblical times, were associated with a person's character. So it is no surprise that the name of God inscribed on the forehead of the redeemed goes beyond the 4 Hebrew letters that define it. It is even a taboo to mention it haphazardly. God's name is his unique and unrepeatable character. I am who I am. As seen in Psalm 119, to meditate on God's name is to love his law, for the law is the written expression of his character. Very important. So it is no surprise that when the psalmist evoked the name of God, meaning when he meditated on his character, he was overcome with the desire to keep God's law. Why? Because God's law is a transcript of his character. And by this, it is not merely about written expression, but it is the loyalty and not legalism. It is love and the likeness to the Redeemer. It is only those who have the names, in other words, in terms of character, the likeness of Christ, who will be able to display the characteristic behavior depicted by Psalm and have the privilege to be on the mountain of Zion. As we move along, the picture becomes more interesting. The redeemed. It is very important for us to understand that Psalm 5, for example, draws a stark contrast between those who bear God's name and those who worship the beast. Of course, there will always be two classes, and especially in the context of prophecy, we cannot make headway without distinguishing the two extreme classes. Here we go. Those who have the other name aside God's name will, of course, eventually have the name of the beast. And according to the biblical record, they shall not dwell with God, as we can see in Psalm 5, verse 4. Again, they worship the beast, and we will delve deeper into this with a lot of factual representations as to who really even the beast represents. Continuing, they are liars. Then they will be punished. Finally, and more importantly, because they have the name of the beast, according to biblical apocalyptic prophecy, they blaspheme against God. How connected is this? Well, let's juxtapose them with the character of those who have the name of God. Those will dwell with God. And clearly we see that even in Revelations, in terms of the introduction of the chapter. They worship God. No surprise. They do not lie. Then they will be redeemed because of having those characteristics preceding this. Finally, they proclaim salvation with joy. Those are the characteristics of the redeemed. And of course, they have built the trust and humble themselves to put on the righteousness of Christ. To sing the Psalms, there has to be another important thing to be done. And here we go to the proclamation of the gospel. David, like Isaiah, saw the weight of his sin and cried out, "Create in me a clean heart," as we see in Psalm 51 verse 10. After receiving forgiveness, both prophets, that is David and Isaiah, became proclaimers of the gospel. So it is no surprise that Revelation's 3 angels' messages begin not with condemnation, but with the everlasting gospel, because it is a message of grace before judgment. Just as David's restored heart led to public witness, the redeemed in Revelation proclaim salvation with power and purity. Of the threefold messages proclaimed to the world in the last generation, the last two are a call to abandon sin. Therefore, it is essential, my brethren, that before pointing out sin, its solution be proclaimed through the first message, the everlasting gospel. By that, we hope to really enjoy a time to come where we will all sing some psalms, not for people, but for God, and through whom we have been redeemed.